You're listening to Faith, Stewardship, and Insurance, Protecting Texas Churches. The show that gives pastors and church leaders the clarity they need to protect their people, property, and ministry.
Welcome back to Faith, Stewardship, and Insurance, Protecting Texas Churches. I'm your host, Ron Wadley with Insurance for Texans. We help church leaders protect their people and property with wisdom and clarity. In today's episode, we are going to help you understand how to know if your church's parsonage is really covered. That question came up for a small church in Abilene. The leaders were reviewing their policy, doing what they thought was routine housekeeping, when someone finally asked about the brick house across the street. The church's pastor had lived there for over 10 years. The house felt permanent and familiar. But as they flipped through the policy, something became uncomfortable very quickly. The house wasn't listed on the policy. No clear coverage meant no answer on what would happen if there was a fire, a storm, or an injury on the property. Parsonages are one of the most commonly overlooked exposures in church insurance, especially in Texas. They sit in a gray area between ministry property and residential living. And when assumptions replace clarity, churches get exposed. Let's talk through what it looks like to have proper coverage for your church's parsonage. The first thing that matters is ownership. If the church owns the parsonage, the church must be the named insured on the policy. It doesn't matter who lives there. It doesn't matter how long they've lived there. Ownership determines insurable interest, and insurance companies care deeply about that detail when a claim is filed. The church in Abilene assumed their main policy covered everything they owned, but the parsonage had never been formally scheduled. That meant one bad loss could have turned into a coverage dispute at exactly the wrong time. Another common mistake that we often see is trying to insure a parsonage with a standard homeowner's policy. That type of policy assumes that the resident of the house actually owns the home. In a church setting, that's usually not true. If a claim occurs and the carrier discovers the church owns the property, coverage can unravel fast. What looked like a simple solution suddenly becomes a very expensive lesson. Church-owned residences need to be insured as commercial property tied directly to the church's insurance program. A third blind spot in insuring a church's parsonage is liability coverage. If the church owns the parsonage, the church can be held responsible for injuries that happen there. A guest trips on the porch. A contractor gets hurt making repairs. A tree limb falls during a storm. Many church liability policies do not automatically extend to residences unless the property is specifically listed or endorsed. The Abilene church learned this the hard way. Adding proper liability protection wasn't difficult, but it required someone who understood how church policies actually work. Then there's the question of what's inside the house. The church typically insures the structure, but the personal belongings inside usually belong to the pastor or staff member living there. Those items aren't covered by the church's policy. That's where coordination matters. The resident of the parsonage needs a renter's policy for their personal property. And if the church provides furnishings, those need to be covered under business personal property on the church policy. When everyone knows who covers what, there's no confusion when something goes wrong. And lastly, maintenance of the property plays a role too. Insurance companies inspect parsonages just like they inspect sanctuaries. Old roofs, outdated wiring, deferred maintenance, all of it affects coverage and cost. The church in Abilene did a walkthrough, made some basic updates, and it paid off when the property was added correctly to their policy. But what changed everything for them was working with a specialist. They realized that their previous agent didn't really understand church property, especially something as nuanced as a parsonage. Once they connected with an experienced church insurance specialist at Insurance for Texans, the conversation shifted. Better questions, clear answers. coverage that matched reality. That's what true Texas church insurance is designed to do. It's not just about the main building. It's about protecting every part of the ministry, including the home you provide for your pastor and their family. If your church owns a parsonage, now is the time to review how it's insured. Don't assume. Don't guess. Make sure it's listed, covered, and aligned with how it's actually used. Connect with our church insurance team at insurancefortexans.com. And if you would like a deeper understanding of church insurance in general, get a copy of our book, The Promise of Certainty, at thepromiseofcertainty.com. I'm Ron Wadley, and this has been Faith Stewardship and Insurance Protecting Texas Churches. Until next time, remember, a church insurance specialist helps with all the details.
Thanks for listening to Faith, Stewardship, and Insurance. Until next time, remember, insurance isn't just about policies. It's about safeguarding the mission God has called you to lead.